Hello, class, and Happy New Year. My name is Melvin J. Placencia, and I'm here to present and to speak to you guys about behaviorism. I chose behaviorism because I've always found it interesting. Everything that went into it, the studies, the people, the key figures involved within behaviorism, and overall just everything it took to bring behaviorism to what it is today and exactly what it proves. So let's get started. Table of contents. So this is basically just walking you through what will be presented today and in the order that will be presented and what to expect. So we'll start off with what is behaviorism. There I will give you the book definition and just more details about behaviorism and the two types of conditioning that have to do with behaviorism, which are operant conditioning and classical conditioning. Hence the little picture here of the mouse holding a sign that says we'll press lever for food. It's just a joke that has to do with operant conditioning. Then from there, we will continue on to key figures, the people that contributed to behaviorism and made it what it is today and what is known for today. And then we will get into the different types of behavior that had to do with behaviorism. And then we would finish off with modern day behaviorism and the works cited page. So, what is behaviorism? The book defines behaviorism as Watson's science of behavior, which dealt solely with observable behavioral acts that could be described in objective terms. Behavior psychology is the study of external behavior. Behavior is objective and observable, whereas what goes on in one's mind can never really be known or measured. The mind is a black box. This I got from reading the book and in the beginning of behaviorism that had to do with John Watson. He wasn't a big fan of introspection. He felt like studying the brain and the unconscious thoughts really wasn't the way to go about understanding humans better. He felt like behaviorism was a better technique to use. And behavior is the response of an organism to stimuli. The stimuli is what determines the behavior of a human being, whether it's positive or negative. So let's get into operant conditioning. Operant conditioning is where the learner is able to make a connection with the consequences associated with his or her behavior. This is true for humans and animals. It works well for both. That's why people are such big fans of behaviorism. So through reinforcement and punishment is what determines the behavior of human beings. There are two types of operant conditioning. There's positive and negative. Predicting behavior with environmental stimuli, which is something that was studied heavily in B.F. Skinner's work. Let's continue. So this is just a picture of exactly how operant conditioning works. You have the stimuli, you have the response that comes with the stimuli, where there's a positive stimuli, negative stimuli. Response. And then you have the two outcomes, whether it's the reinforcement or the punishment. And whatever happens in it, out of those two, whatever happens is what the human being or animal is going to remember next time when they respond to that certain stimuli. So let's get into classical conditioning. Classical conditioning, natural reflex that occurs in response to a stimuli. A naturally occurring stimulus is with a neutral stimulus, allowing the neutral stimulus to, in time, evoke a natural reflex. So what that basically means is like you've seen all the experiments of little Albert. So this is basically explaining that the natural stimulus that is occurring, the more that a human being or animal is exposed to it, the more they become used to it, and it becomes a natural reflex. So, for example, whenever little Albert saw the mouse, it caught on and realized that it knew something bad was about to happen, whether it was the loud noise that came associated with it. So he learned to not like the rat. So that's basically what's explaining. So techniques of classical conditioning are used today in treatment of phobias and anxiety. As I mentioned before, the experiments were little Albert and Pavlov's dogs, which Pavlov's dogs explained almost the same scenario as little Albert, where the dogs will salivate whenever they would hear the bell. I think it was the bell. Yeah. And even and because they knew food was coming. So they associated those two. So even when the bell rang, they will salivate, even if the food wasn't coming. So, and I can see how it could be used to treat phobias nowadays and anxiety because when somebody gets anxiety, they associate one thing with another, which leads to anxiety. So doing the opposite would would treat that phobia or anxiety. So continuing, we learn to associate a stimulus with a response, and eventually our body does this automatically in the presence of the stimulus. As I mentioned before, you become used to that stimulus, and it becomes a natural reflex. A response is involuntary, so after a while, it just happens. It automatically happens. So continuing, we will now speak about the key figures, the people that had to do a lot with behaviorism into what it is today. So before we get started, I just want to mention in the book and in the research that I did, there was many key figures that had to do with that affected behaviorism. But I only narrowed down to the three main key players that actually had the biggest effect of all of them. To begin with, that would be Ivan Pavlov. Born 1849, died 1936. Researched the psychology of digestion in mammals. This research led to his interest in conditioned reflexes. Discovered classical conditioning. Pavlov's dogs is a well-known experiment in which Pavlov used classical conditioning, as I mentioned before. Ivan Pavlov trained the dogs to salivate when they heard a bell after he associated the sound of the bell with the dog being fed. And I mentioned before, he kept doing this until it became a natural reflex. So when the bell would ring, the dogs will automatically think there's food coming. Well, they will salivate thinking there's food coming even if the food wasn't coming. They associated the bell with the food. Just a little side note, Ivan Pavlov was awarded the Nobel Prize for Psychology in 1904 for the classical conditioning. Oh, and just to mention, Ivan Pavlov was the beginning of behaviorism. Not exactly the founder of behaviorism, but his interest in digestion in mammals that led to conditioned reflexes led researchers and other psychologists to better understand or create behaviorism. So let's get on with John B. Watson, born 1875, died 1958, known as the father of behaviorism. Changed the focus of psychology from introspection to environmentalism. Watson's work was influenced by the experiments of Pavlov, as I mentioned before, who found the conditioning and he just took with it and ran with it. So, known for conducting little Albert experiments, conditioning experiment of an infant, as I mentioned before, where they associated a playful animal with a loud noise. The primary subject matter for Watson's behavior psychology was the element of behavior, the body's muscular movement and glandular secretions. So he felt that was a human being's true feelings or thoughts towards something, or towards a stimulus. So he felt like that's why it was better to study behaviorism, because your body automatically associates one stimuli to another. It's not like a mental process where you could just erase and switch it up completely. It's just your body is already used to this, so it shows more truth within the study. And continuing, B.F. Skinner, 1904 to 1990. This was towards the end of behaviorism, as I would like to say, because after B.F. Skinner, behaviorism was not very of a interest in psychology, like I say. So, known as the father of operant conditioning, believed that behavior can be controlled by consequences. He emphasized on measuring observable behavior instead of unobservable behavior, the unconscious behavior. Tested his theories on operant conditioning on rats. At first, the rats would accidentally press the levers, and food or water would drop into the dish. The rats became conditioned to repeat this positive action because they knew every time they pressed the lever, they assumed that water or food would drop. So continuing. So throughout my study, I found that there are three types of behaviorism: methodological behaviorism, which is a normative theory about the scientific conduct of psychology. It claims that psychology should concern itself with the behavior of organisms, human and non-human animals. Psychological behaviorism explain human and animal behavior in terms of external physical stimuli, responses, learning histories, which is reinforcement, and analytical or logical behaviorism. How a person behaves in one situation rather than another. So analytical or logical behaviorism, it basically explains that a person behaves different depending on the situation, even if the stimuli has already been 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 already put into the person's mind, like I said. Like they will switch up because of the situation. So, what is behaviorism today? Presently day, behaviorism is still used in our everyday life. We just don't notice it. Whenever we associate two things together, we always assume that they will go together. That is behaviorism itself. So behaviorism is used, as mentioned before, for treating phobias, parenting, and even animal training. After Skinner's death in 1990, behaviorism was replaced by cognitive approach. Skinner conceded before his death that, oh, sorry, before I get into this is from the textbook that, I got this from the textbook mentioning that, which is something that Skinner mentioned towards the end of his life. He realized that behaviorism was slowly dying out and was being replaced by cognitive approach. He mentioned before his death that his form of behaviorism was losing ground and that the impact of the cognitive approach was growing. He realized that. So behaviorism accomplished its goal of its founder, which was to develop technology that could change behavior for the better and for humans to better understand why they do the things they do, even if it's a natural act of behavior. So, continuing, this is just my works cited page that shows where all the work came from. Found two websites, and most of it came from the textbook. So, thank you for your time. I really appreciate. Thank you for your time, and any questions, just leave them on the form. Thank you.